My phone didn't just buzz, it screamed a violation. I was in Denver, a mile high and sealed inside a glass conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. This was a career-defining week. Then the notification flashed, not a text from my mother, an alert from a police impound lot in Corolla, North Carolina. My black Lexus GX, locked in my garage back in Minneapolis, explicitly off limits, had been towed nearly 1,400 miles away. The boundary wasn't just crossed, it was shattered. I stared at the screen. No panic, just a cold, sharp realization. This wasn't a mistake. It was a declaration of war. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. As we step into a new year, I want to wish everyone clarity, strength, and the courage to finally put themselves first. And if these stories resonate with you, support the channel so we can keep building this space together. I stepped out of the conference room into the hallway, the keynote speaker's voice fading behind heavy walnut doors. My hand was steady as I lifted the phone to my ear. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, the voice of someone who had seen every version of human entitlement. Officer Reynolds explained the situation with clinical precision. My Lexus had been blocking a private driveway on the Outer Banks for over 5 hours. When the homeowners called it in, the people who returned to the vehicle, a man and a woman in their early 60s, along with a younger woman, had argued with the tow operator. They claimed it was a family car. They claimed they had permission. They claimed it was all a misunderstanding. That phrase lingered between us. Family car. It implied communal ownership. It implied that my $80,000 asset, the one I paid for, insured, and maintained, was somehow a shared resource they could access whenever they felt entitled to a beach escape. In the past, I would have panicked. I would have asked if they were okay. I would have apologized to the officer and offered to pay whatever fine was necessary just to smooth things over. But standing there in that hallway, 1,000 miles away from the Carolina humidity, I felt a switch flip. This wasn't confusion. It was theft wrapped in the entitlement of blood. I didn't ask if they were safe. I didn't ask for clarification. I said, "Officer, I am the sole owner of that vehicle. I am currently in Colorado. I did not give anyone permission to take that car out of my garage, let alone across multiple states. If they have the keys, they obtained them illegally." There was a pause. I could hear the recalibration on the other end of the line. He wasn't speaking to a frazzled daughter anymore. He was speaking to the victim of a felony. He asked if I wanted them detained. I told him I wanted my property secured. I authorized him to flag the vehicle immediately. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. They hadn't just been towed, they had retrieved the Lexus from the impound lot using a spare key they were never supposed to have and attempted to drive back to Minnesota before I found out. They didn't get far. A patrol unit had pulled them over on Highway 64. My parents, Linda and Robert, along with my sister Madison, were removed from the vehicle. I closed my eyes and let the image form on its own. The three of them, standing on the shoulder of the road, heat rising off the asphalt, surrounded by beach bags, folding chairs, and sand-filled shoes. I pictured Madison, the golden child who had never been told no, realizing her smile didn't work on state troopers. I pictured my mother's outrage, her certainty that she could talk her way out of anything, dissolving as the tow hook locked into place for the second time that day. My phone lit up. Mom, Dad, Madison. Mom again. The screen pulsed like a warning signal, a frantic code of panic and fury. They were stranded hundreds of miles from home, with no car, no plan, and no leverage. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sadness. I felt the clean, quiet satisfaction of a ledger finally balancing itself. I silenced the phone, slid it into my blazer pocket, and walked back into the conference room. I had a networking lunch to attend, and for the first time in years, I had nothing to manage, fix, or absorb. Some people would call it cruel to leave aging parents and a sister on the side of a highway in the middle of summer. They'd say I overreacted to a family misunderstanding. But those people don't know the history of the word no in my family. They don't understand that no was never a boundary to my parents. It was a challenge. Before I left for Denver, I didn't casually suggest they avoid my car. I explicitly told them the Lexus was off limits. I changed the garage access code. I removed the spare key from the entry drawer and locked it inside a fireproof safe in my home office. I took those steps because I'd already learned this lesson once. 2 years earlier, Madison had borrowed my previous car, a sedan I had just finished paying off, to drive to a music festival she couldn't afford. She rear-ended another vehicle while texting. The damage totaled just over $5,000. When I brought the bill to my parents, my mother said making Madison pay would damage her confidence. She called it a learning experience. She told me family doesn't invoice family. I paid the deductible. I absorbed the premium increase. Madison posted photos from the festival I had unknowingly sponsored. That was the day the Bank of Atlanta officially closed. Or so I thought. Sitting alone in my hotel room that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized I'd been trapped in the sunk cost fallacy of blood. In economics, a sunk cost is an investment you can't recover, something you're not supposed to let influence future decisions. But people do. We keep pouring time, money, and energy into failing systems because we can't accept what we've already lost. I had been paying a blood tax my entire adult life. I paid it quietly when they forgot my birthday, but demanded extravagant celebrations for Madison. I paid it in cash when I covered emergencies they created and called bad luck. I paid it in patience when they dismissed my career as nice, while praising Madison's half-formed ideas and short-lived jobs like acts of genius. I kept paying because I believed reliability would be rewarded, that if I became successful enough, generous enough, unshakable enough, they would eventually look at me and see a daughter instead of a resource. But replaying the timeline of the theft, finding the hidden key, bypassing the garage code, driving nearly 1,500 miles to a resort town, I finally accepted the truth. There is no return on investment with narcissists. They don't see generosity, they see weakness. They don't see forgiveness, they see permission. My car wasn't borrowed, it was seized, because in their minds, anything I earned belonged to the collective, while anything Madison wanted belonged to her. The tax was no longer affordable. I was done throwing good money and good years after bad. I wasn't just retrieving a vehicle anymore. I was liquidating the account. I landed back in Minneapolis on a gray Wednesday afternoon and took a rideshare straight to the impound lot. The clerk behind the glass barely looked up as I slid my credit card across the counter. The total came to $2,420. I signed the receipt without hesitation. Walking toward the Lexus, nausea crept in, not from the cost, but from the violation. It didn't feel like my car anymore. A deep scratch cut across the passenger door, likely from a beach chair dragged without care. Inside, the smell hit. Coconut sunscreen, old fast food, damp towels. Sand ground into the carpet. A sticky film coated the console. The one space in my life that had always been under my control had been desecrated. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to see their faces when I arrived in the car they had stolen. They were all there in the living room. Linda, Robert, and Madison, sunburned, exhausted, still wearing the same clothes they'd been stranded in. A normal family would have been horrified. A normal parent would have apologized, offered to pay, begged for forgiveness. But I wasn't raised in a normal family. I was raised in a hierarchy, and I had just broken rank. My mother stood up immediately. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask about the car. She pointed at me and screamed that I was selfish, that I had humiliated them, that I had no right to leave my own family on the side of the road like criminals. In that moment, the mechanism of their cruelty became clear. Psychologists call it a narcissistic injury. To a narcissist, a boundary isn't a line, it's an attack. By reporting the car stolen, I hadn't just inconvenienced them, I had shattered the illusion that they owned me. I had publicly proven I was a separate person with legal rights, not an extension of their will. Their rage wasn't about the heat or the towing fees. It was about control slipping through their fingers. My father joined in, his voice heavy with entitlement. He said everything I had, my career, my money, my stability, was only possible because of them, that I owed them for my success, that my assets were essentially family property because they had raised me. Madison sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up to mutter that I was overreacting and that it was just a car. They were rewriting reality in real time, casting me as the villain for reclaiming what was mine. That's when I understood there was nothing to discuss. You can't negotiate with people who believe your autonomy is an insult. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I looked at the three of them, people who shared my DNA but not my values, and realized the bank wasn't just closed, it was being demolished. Leaving wasn't an act of anger, it was an act of disposal. I walked out of that house with the quiet finality of someone ending a business relationship that had been training them for years. They were still shouting as I backed out of the driveway, their voices muted by the soundproof glass of the Lexus they had defiled. I drove home in silence. No tears this time, just the hum of the engine and the clarity of a decision already made. When I got home, I didn't collapse onto the couch. I went straight to my home office, opened my laptop, and started an audit. For years, I had been the unseen infrastructure of their lives, the safety net they never acknowledged. I started with the reoccurring expenses. First, the subscriptions. Every month, boxes of organic snacks and household supplies arrived at Madison's apartment through my account because she once complained about costs. Canceled. Next, the veterinarian's office. My credit card was listed as the backup payment for my parents' dog, quietly charged for emergencies that were really routine visits they didn't budget for. I called and removed my authorization. Deleted. Finally, the joint emergency account I had opened with my father years earlier. I transferred the remaining balance into my personal savings and closed it. The silence lasted 48 hours. That's how long it took for the first declined transaction to hit. Then the smear campaign began. Madison posted a vague message online about people who valued money over family. My phone started ringing. An aunt called, worried, saying my mother had told her I was having some kind of breakdown, that I was unstable, paranoid, lashing out at everyone who loved me. They were trying to control the narrative, to turn me into the villain so they could remain the victims. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I compiled a PDF, 3 pages. Page 1, the police report stating unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. Page 2, the towing invoice. Page 3, photographs of the damage to my car. I sent it without a subject line to the 3 most level-headed people in our extended family. I didn't ask for support. I let the facts speak. The rumors stopped almost immediately. The truth doesn't need volume, it just needs light. 2 days later, I was in my driveway with a shop vacuum, trying to pull the smell of sunscreen and entitlement out of the leather seats, when I noticed something wedged deep between the rear cushion and the console, a sliver of white. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a card. It was heavy, expensive cardstock, cream-colored with gold foil lettering. I opened it expecting a receipt or maybe a valet ticket. Instead, there was a handwritten note. Madison, it was such a pleasure meeting you this weekend. Your new car is absolutely beautiful. Thank you for driving us to brunch. We're so excited to see where things go with you and Evan. Warmly, Mrs. Holloway. I sat back on my heels, the card trembling in my hand as the pieces locked together with brutal clarity. Evan, the new boyfriend Madison wouldn't stop talking about, the one from the old money family outside Wilmington. They hadn't taken my Lexus for convenience. They hadn't wanted a free beach trip. They had used my car as a prop. The secrecy, the distance, the insistence on my vehicle specifically. They were staging a life for Madison, presenting her as the successful, affluent daughter who drove an $80,000 SUV while erasing me completely. To the Holloways, I didn't exist. I was a ghost, an invisible account funding the illusion. In that moment, my understanding of my sister shifted. She wasn't just spoiled, she was hollow. A golden child phantom, someone so empty she had to wear the success of others to feel real. She needed my car, my money, my stability, because without them, she was just a 26-year-old with no job and a long trail of bad decisions. They hadn't built her up. They had cannibalized me to do it. I looked at the card again, at the elegant handwriting thanking a thief for her hospitality, and the anger in my chest cooled into something final. They wanted to play pretend. Fine. I was done protecting the illusion. The next morning, my phone alerted me to a transaction, not a deposit, a withdrawal. $780 drained from a custodial savings account I had opened with my father when I was 19 and had forgotten still existed. That alert sealed it. Desperate to pay Evan back for towing fees and rides he couldn't afford, my father hadn't asked, he had taken, because in his mind, my money was still his safety net. I didn't call the bank yet. I printed the transaction record and drove to my office. I had barely settled at my desk when the receptionist buzzed me. "Elena, your sister is here. She's upset." Madison stood in the lobby wearing oversized sunglasses, shaking, right on the edge of collapse. She didn't apologize. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "You have to help me. Evan wants to go to the mountains this weekend. He asked why I'm not driving the Lexus. I told him it was in the shop. He wants to see it." Her voice cracked. "Please, just one more weekend. I just need it to keep the story straight until he proposes. Then I'll tell him everything." She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for the costume back. I studied her, the panic of an imposter watching the stage lights turn on. I reached into my bag and handed her a manila envelope. Relief washed over her face until she opened it. Inside were the police report, the towing invoice, the bank withdrawal record, and a cease and desist letter from my attorney regarding any further use of my property or funds. "The performance is over," I said quietly. "You don't have my car, you don't have my money, and you don't have a sister willing to fund your lies anymore. You can tell Evan the truth, or I will." The color drained from her face. The prop was gone. The safety net was gone. She was standing on her own for the first time in her life, and it terrified her. I turned and walked back to my office, leaving her alone with the evidence of her fraud. The fallout came fast. When Madison couldn't produce the car and the story collapsed under her panic, the relationship ended before it could become an engagement. The Holloways quietly distanced themselves from a family that staged wealth like theater. My parents called non-stop, accusing me of destroying everything, of being vindictive, of tearing the family apart. Their voices were distant now, filtered through blocked numbers and ignored messages. The extended family, the ones who had seen the receipts, stopped enabling them. For the first time, my parents had to face the consequences of entitlement without a safety net. I changed my number 2 weeks later. I had my car professionally detailed, scrubbing away every grain of sand, every stain, until it smelled only of leather and my own perfume. It felt like a baptism. Driving home one evening as the sun dipped behind the Minneapolis skyline, I noticed how quiet my life had become. No emergency calls, no guilt, no fear of the next boundary they would break. The silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful. I had spent years paying an account that only grew with inflation. Now the account was closed. I was the villain in their story. Fine. I was finally the hero in my own. And as I merged onto the highway, I didn't look back. I just kept driving, knowing the only person in the driver's seat was me. If this story made you pause longer than you expected, comment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Most people scroll past stories like this. The ones who subscribe are the ones trying to change something inside themselves. If this made you stop scrolling, subscribe.